immediately the unique elements of your own experience will start to come out, and you'll be surprised as well by some of those. And the other person's will also be unique. A regular practice, however brief, is a good thing because it kind of builds that muscle of, yes, I do this thing.
Have you ever wondered how writing can support your well-being? Join us on Grafto, the Power of Writing podcast, where we explore the transformative power of words. I'm your host, Alina Maragelis, and together with our amazing guests, we'll delve into the world of writing and its incredible benefits. Fiona Hamilton, who champions the arts as a powerful force for connection, understanding, and healing. Fiona has published drama scripts, poetry collection, radio pieces, and public art. And her extensive collaborations span from dance projects based on verse and plays exploring mind and music, and even poem films that delve into our relationship with nature and inequality. She's a facilitator and teacher of creative writing for therapeutic purposes, advocating for collective story consciousness to combat stigma and open up more truthful narratives around health and illness. Fiona, welcome.
Thank you, Alina. Good to be here.
Very good to have you here. And Fiona, your work spans so many fascinating areas. And let's start with writing as a way of listening. Could you elaborate on that? How can the act of writing become practice of deep listening?
Yeah, well, thank you for having me here. And so writing comes in many forms, and it's often thought of as an active pursuit, something that generates words and text and script to reach an audience. And that's something that we all may participate in. But I think there are other forms of writing as well, and that's one version. There's a kind of writing process which can allow us to listen in both to ourselves and the world around us more deeply and more fully with all our senses, with our felt sense. In that way, it's a way to perhaps gain insights.
And could you give us an example of how writing has helped you, or maybe someone you've worked with, to listen more deeply to their inner voice, or maybe the subtleness of their surroundings?
Yeah, I think it's just if any one of us was to pause for a moment now and take a breath and just listen, and by that I don't mean only auditory listening with our ears, I mean with our whole selves as much as we can. In order to do that, then we would find that there are sounds, there are sensations in our bodies, there are things that we wouldn't normally notice around us. And there are also, of course, our feelings and thoughts. And we need to be a little bit slower and create that space in order to notice those things. And perhaps if we're then thinking, I'm doing this in order to note some things down with a keyboard or a pen, or just note them for myself, perhaps I'm journaling, then that will be a place to put some of those observations, those impressions. And I think, something I do, I know plenty of people who do some form of journaling every so often, or sometimes more daily. So that's one very accessible form, I think, for lots of people.
And any other particular type of writing?
I think that storytelling is a thing that is inherent in humans, and by that I mean we are storytelling creatures. I think it was the psychologist Jerome Bruno who probably coined that phrase, and it's a good one. We narrate our lives. We're doing it all the time. We might be doing it in the queue for the supermarket. We might be doing it on the phone to a friend. We're telling little snippets of our lives and receiving those. And then we may participate in something more, crafted storytelling. There are some forums for that in this society I live in the UK. more in some other cultures of actually listening to live stories from another human being. And then, of course, there's social media and the abundance of narratives that are being put out on there. So your question is, what other forms of writing? I mean, other forms of text and other forms of narrative are all around us, and we can choose within that what kinds we're going to use. So the kinds I'm particularly interested in are probably really different from the bite-sized memes that are prevalent on social media. So I think they would include iterative writing, where you might note down some words, look at them, shape them into something, maybe short lines with plenty of space around them, so you can look at them on the page and think, yeah, there's some meaning there. There's also some meaning that's missing. What am I going to put in there?
And how can we develop this ability to listen as writers?
Partly by taking the space, and that's not an easy thing to do in our busy lives, and to say to ourselves, even if it's just for a short time, every few days, 5 minutes, but regularly, that's one thing. And to create a regular practice like that can really help. And then by its very nature, I think writing is a slowing down of sorts. We can't blast off a very quick haiku. We can't shoot out a piece of prose that expresses the layers of our feelings about a new relationship. We have to spend a bit of time reflecting. And so that's part of it. And some people are able to find a forum with others, a community where that can happen, perhaps with some facilitation. And that is another way that it can be, a forum for doing that.
And does this have implications for individuals and our society?
Yeah, totally. I think the digital world is a wonderful thing. There's so much amazing material there. I really I love it for finding things out, knowing what's going on and so on. However, the sort of favouring of the bite-sized meme, and the meme is a little nugget of information, whether it's in text or image or video. And meme comes from the Greek meaning to imitate. So it sort of gets imitated and replicated really quickly all over the world. That is kind of entertaining, but it doesn't really train us to listen. And so what it can do as well, because we're often in our particular groups that we join on social media, I think it's quite common for lots of people to be in certain groups and then not others, is that it becomes about I am this, and everything else is either I can't hear it, or I'm not listening to it, or it's kind of irrelevant, or I disagree with it, but I'm not having a conversation, to put it bluntly. So I think the conversation is absolutely essential, and collaborative writing, which isn't thought of as individualistic, is a brilliant way to enable that. So it can enable us to think and listen into ourselves, but also listen into different perspectives around us.
Yeah, and I know you see writing collaborative like helping tune into connection that we might otherwise, ignore or even deny. How this collaborative aspect of writing fosters a deeper sense of connection within our communities or even between individuals. Back to what you were saying, that we kind of sometimes go like that, right?
Well, I think that if you get together in a small group or a bigger group, or even just with one other person, and you're asked, let's say, to write your experience of an emotion, say joy or sadness, immediately the unique elements of your own experience will start to come out, and you'll be surprised as well by some of those. And the other person's will also be unique, and it will not be the same, although you might recognize some similarities and overlaps. And so it's that, and then there's the process of actually listening to their perspective and noticing those similarities and those complete differences and thinking, wow, not everyone experiences sadness the way I do, or not everyone experiences joy the way I do. And then, of course, you extrapolate from that, and you can think about any theme in our lives as humans. When we cannot listen and we cannot even use our imaginations to think into different perspectives, we're at risk of completely denying others' points of view. And that leads to conflict, it leads to a kind of insanity, I would say. And that is really, it's why stories really are important. People will fight about them, but they don't have to fight about them if they are willing to spend time together and listen to each other's.
Yeah, so writing in a way can help us see this tension that we have in our lives, right? And once we create that space, then of course it allows for different connections. And I know you champion collective story consciousness. Could you unpack a bit what collective story consciousness means to you? And how I would say perhaps differs from or complements individual therapeutic writing.
Maybe I've touched on it in saying that when we listen to each other, we notice some connections. And I think we've grown up maybe in the West, certainly I have, very influenced by ideas from the Romantic movement and Enlightenment ideas that there's an individual who is writing a piece of text and there's inspiration coming from somewhere, and it all happens in quite an isolated way. I don't really believe that. I think even a novel is a collective activity. You only have to look at the acknowledgements in any novel and you'll see a bunch of people are involved in that, never mind all the readings of other works that the author has done. So it's already, writing is a collective activity. And then we can make it more so, participate in projects where there are maybe words with another art form or a couple of different writers collaborating. So I've done a number of those types of projects, quite a lot. And they're so enriching to work with across artistic disciplines. They are kind of different languages. So having worked with dancers, for example, I watched them read some words that I'd written and select from them and write by hand some columns of words that spoke to them. And then those spoke to them because there was something about the body and movement and something tangible in it that they could then kind of bring into movement forms and make something out of. And then in turn, I was able to respond to that in words. And together we made a piece. And that was to do with an experience of caring for someone with a mental health illness and interpreting it differently and bringing it out into a place where people could view, but also listen and then have a conversation about it and bring their own stories into.
And you're currently working on a poem film, which I'm intrigued about. So I want to know more about that. So can you tell us about that project?
Well, it's in early days. Its working title is Digital Invisible Romantic Semantic. And it's a lot to do with how do we interact with the natural or more than human world in the world that we're in at the moment, where we know there's a climate emergency and so on, that we have to have a different relationship with it if we're really listening in. But how can we do that? And what is kind of the point of writing in the midst of that? So it's also thinking about the different senses. So in this case, I'm using visual impressions as well as spoken word. And I think initially it will be transmitted online rather than in person, but who knows? And the idea of digital invisible is that we have this vast realm of digital meaning, but it's very intangible. Whereas the world of nature and the more than human is actually something you can breathe and listen to and smell and taste and touch. And so they're different phenomena. And there's a sense perhaps that the digital world is kind of everything. It feels as though it sort of wants to be everything.
Yeah.
But it's not. And how do we find a balance between those things? How do we not get sucked into its magic realm too fully and forget about those things that we also really need as human beings? I think during the pandemic, people realised that, there's such a need to balance the embodied world with things that are digital. And I somehow got thinking about the genie in the bottle myth story, and how the genie comes out of a bottle in the ocean and is huge and made of smoke and goes everywhere. And the digital world feels a bit like that to me at the moment. The clever fisherman manages to coax the genie back into the bottle and then wants to let the other people know not to let the genie out too much or too sort of unthinkingly.
Oh, sounds I'm looking forward to when it's ready and when it's out. And it's very, I would say, yeah, connected with where the world is right now.
Yeah.
And more the AI as it develops, we will be probably even more bombarded. And there are good elements in this, of course.
Yeah.
But there are some elements that will, especially maybe the upcoming generations, that might lose. And what are the benefits? Because you were talking about the benefits of being connected with nature and going a bit outside of the virtual world. What are some of the benefits? Why should we do that, Fiona?
Yeah, I mean, I think I don't want to feel that we can't connect the two either. There's plenty of great, interesting, innovative work with using technology in the world that's around us.
Yes.
And that's great and fabulous. I think there's also just a reality that technology can go faster than humans can go, and it's going ever faster. And we've seen that in the last few decades. It speeds up. It gets amazingly competent very, very quickly. And in the last 5 years, AI has learned how to do more things more quickly and so on.
Yes.
Human beings can only breathe at a certain pace. Our hearts only beat at a certain kind of pace within a certain spectrum. We cannot do beyond a certain number of hours of activity without needing rest, and so on. The world of the tree, the plant, the insect, the bird, and so on is more similar to our world in some ways as humans than it is digital creations of humans, in that we have a rhythm and we have a pace, and we need to honour that. And I think so finding ways to do that is important. And the thing I'm proposing with writing in a broad sense, and that practice of reflective writing, is one way to do that.
Yeah, very, very beautifully said. And I know you do significant part of your specialty work involves health and illness, aiming to combat a bit and enable deeper exchanges. And could you share an example of how a creative project has successfully opened up conversations or shifted, I don't know, narratives around health in a tangible way, maybe?
Yeah. I'm thinking about work that I've done, a couple of things. One most recent, which is a translation of a short novella, perhaps you could call it, by Emma Santos, who wrote in French and hadn't been translated into English as far as I know. But collaborating on that translation has meant looking at her world. And her world is one of somebody with what I could say is an unusual emotional and thinking landscape. So doing that, which is one thing to kind of try and enter into, but then the language that's not my first language, French, and trying to see what that can be in English, or what the sister version of it is in English, has been really interesting. But it's also because the story involves her mental health disarray at times, you could say, but also just the richness of her inner life, which is not like many other people's. And some of that involves her being treated for, as it were, I don't know what we'd call it now. I don't think there was a label for her, but something like bipolar, maybe. And she spent time in a psychiatric hospital. And so, sort of, I think narratives where people are able to give their first-hand lived experience and then others pay attention to it, it can make us understand differently. It was certainly a type of experience I haven't had myself, but she portrays it so vividly. And then the effort and the engagement trying to translate made it more important to kind of listen in more closely. But also to sometimes say, well, I'm not sure I do understand that, or we do, because there are two translators, myself and Alison Howard. And I'm going to honour it the best way I can. I'm going to spread my wings in this language and with my understandings and put something out there. But that's one example. I can give you another one if you want.
Yes, please.
So I wrote something which was based on the lived experience of a woman called Victoria Wells, who has chronic pain because of hip dysplasia. So she was kind of born with that, but has had operations, and it's affected her mobility, but also it's involved operations and treatments and so on. And one of the ways she used to support herself was music and creating playlists, and even creating a playlist to walk down to the operating theatre to listen to give herself some extra kind of energy and support. And I wrote the play in collaboration with her, the verbatim stories, but moving those into a more fictional environment where there was another person who'd experienced different kind of pain, and having them dialogue, having them explore that, but also kind of move with it. So it might sound a very serious, sort of rather depressing topic, but actually there's so much in it. And also our lives have these things in them. So if we can open up spaces to explore them creatively with some lightness, some seriousness, some invention, then that's a good thing.
Yeah, of course. And on that, how would you say creative arts, and I would say particularly writing, can help us be more empathetic?
Well, empathy is, I suppose we can say in a colloquial way, putting ourselves in someone else's shoes.
Yeah.
Being able to perceive an experience that is not our own, and also feel it, and not just know it's happened, but have a sense of some sort of imaginative depth that connects us with that person who's had that experience. So if we open up a space in our own life to consciously attend to different narratives, so my work with creative writing for therapeutic purposes is that we have groups and communities of people who are doing that very thing, and we're listening to each other within the group, but also to others outside who've maybe written or made videos or created artworks or whatever that are expanding our horizons and representing different cultures. And also we're listening out for the gaps, so the stories that are not being listened to. So we're trying to expand our horizons, and in a smaller way, between the lines or within a piece of writing, what's not being said, which in a way mirrors some of the things in our own lives. What's not being said, what is hidden, what has been held as a story that cannot be told, and creating the potential to gently and carefully look at those as well.
And if there are people who, let's say, would like to explore creative writing, What would you say? What would be a good start for them? Because it can be quite out there, right? For someone who is not writing for, and I'm thinking for therapeutic purposes.
Right.
So, what would be a good start for them?
I think journaling's a good start.
Mm-hmm.
However you want to do that. So that can be you pick up your phone and you record. Oops, dropping something. You pick up your phone and you record something while you're walking somewhere that you notice. Something that feels important to you. Can be very short. You could do it in a notebook. You could do it on your iPad or device. So journaling, and it doesn't have to be big, and it can be very brief. But as I mentioned earlier, a regular practice, however brief, is a good thing because it kind of builds that muscle of, yes, I do this thing, and I do it every so often, every few days maybe. And then that starts getting you into a way of thinking that might be noticing things in the world differently. Mm-hmm. So I would say that. I think that writing comes with a lot of baggage attached to that very concept. It can be thought of as an exclusive activity. Education systems may make it feel so. Other things in society may also. The publishing marketplace is something that maybe contributes to that in some ways. But story belongs to everyone. Every single person on the planet has stories of their lives in some way or another. And its first step is to say, yes, my story exists. And the second step is to say, it has meaning for me, and I think it's worth exploring or even expressing or even sharing.
Yes. And tell us a bit about the reflection part. Because part of and I know this from my personal experience and the work we've done together, how important that is. So let's explore that a bit.
Well, the practice of creative writing for therapeutic purposes involves creative writing in lots of different forms and genres and styles. And in tandem with that, like they hold hands, is a reflective way of looking at that process of writing. So very close in time, usually, possibly with a short pause in between them. You will have the reflective part coming after the writing. And maybe that's in further writing, but it might be in conversation with someone else. It will be looking through and checking in and listening to what's been going on and noticing things. So it might be, while I was writing it, I noticed I was censoring myself. I wasn't writing about such and such. Or while I was writing it, I was feeling this sense of puzzlement and curiosity, and I realized there was something else I wanted to say, so I did. Or I noticed that there's a really strong image there that I wasn't expecting. I wasn't expecting an image of a balloon or a flower or a camel. That came. Where did it come from? What's its significance? Those sorts
balloon of things. Random, right?
Yeah. Surprises that bubble up from inside.
Writing about nature and then a balloon comes. So yeah.
So we get a chance to just ponder. Oh, I'm looking at that again and seeing maybe I do some more writing arising out of those images. And it's surprising what meanings come out of that. I expect you've experienced that, Alina. What new meanings emerge that we didn't give ourselves a chance to explore before. So kind of thing.
And would you say we get to know ourselves better? Because I think for me, it helped me to look at narratives. And I think something sometimes that you're not aware of your own thoughts and your narratives. So tell us a bit about that.
I think so. I think it's a way of understanding ourselves more deeply. And as you understand yourself more deeply, you probably understand the mysteries more as well.
Yes.
So it's always work in progress, which can make it exciting but also challenging sometimes. So, as with there are other activities where this can happen, of course. Getting to know ourselves physically might involve, going for walks regularly or playing a sport or mending an engine. I don't know. But this particular way, I think you can see some of the layers of ourselves and also the ways that we're shaped by our pasts and relationships, environments, things that we've lacked maybe, or things that we've had. We might be noticing that we're more grateful for things than we thought we were, or we might find that we have a voice about a particular aspect of our experience that needs to be allowed out. So I think those things are part of it, yeah. And if we don't do it, conversely, we can kind of push on through. The world will probably support you to push on through and try and meet some goals and be quick and be active and be busy. It tends to do that these days in the Western societies, at least. And that means you can actually not develop very many layers of understanding of yourself, your motivations, the parts of your perception that are not looking sideways or broadly, that are maybe bringing assumptions. You may not notice the ways you're privileged or you're finding answers to things too quickly. So if you do it, there's a chance you might unearth some of that and possibly make a few changes.
Yeah. And how would that help us? Why? Because it sometimes can be not an easy process. Yeah. Why should we do it? What are some of the benefits?
The benefits, as I say, partly are, if I say it the other way around, if we do not do any of that reflective process in any way in our lives, our prejudices and our assumptions and our position in the world can be just taken for granted. That is not a recipe for understanding between peoples. In order to have some sorts of flexibility and space for conversation, negotiation, things that are absolutely crucial in our world for obtaining peace and not conflict, those things, we have to do that. We have to have some space in our lives to do that. Inwardly first, and then we can do it more outwardly. If we don't do it inwardly, the chances of us doing it on a bigger scale are minute, I would think. So that's why, really. And then on a personal level, well, it can be enriching. It can help you make sense of things that are difficult and tangled and maybe when you were younger didn't make much sense, or you thought were the only way, but it turns out there's another way as well, or other ways. And it can also be very enjoyable and pleasurable, because allowing your creative, playful, joyful, random self out to play when you're an adult can be a good thing for everybody too. It's not all about the very serious things, but it can be too.
Yes, you can bring all the balloons and and with different colors, right? Well, Fiona, thank you. I really enjoyed our conversation, our rich and I would say philosophical conversation we had today. And thank you for being with us today. And best of luck with the projects you have going on. And I'm looking forward to hear more about them in the future.
Thank you so much, Alina. I've really enjoyed it, and you've asked me some very thought-provoking questions today.
Good. I think our audience will love it as well, especially I think the depth of and layers we've reached today. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.